Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, guys. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're with us today. So we have a teen expert. Her name is Dr. Andrea Mata, and she's going to be talking to us about how to navigate the mental health crisis and just general mental health with teens and what her tips and tricks are for helping those years go easier. With that, let's get to Dr. Matea.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about teen mental health because this is such an important topic. We don't give enough time to it, and it's such an important stage, but like adolescence lasts a long time, 11 to 25. That is so long.
Yeah, so it's just recently, probably in the last, I think actually 25 years, they've extended adolescence to 25. Before, it was just like 13 to 18.
Yes.
And then in 2020, this psychologist by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Arndt, he kind of came up with this new developmental period called emerging adulthood, and it's from 18 to 25, and it's just an extension of adolescence.
Yeah, which I think is so important because the truth is turning 18 does not make you an adult.
Not even close.
I feel like I'm still learning how to adult and I'm 40, right? So definitely at 18,
Mhm.
we don't have it all together.
Yeah, I
We're still
understand.
we're still worried about our nails and our makeup and, like, who we're dating and all the things, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, even at 40, like, I was like, "Oh, I didn't paint my nails for this one," but I was like, "Just no one's gonna pay attention to your nails, like,
Yes,
just get
that's
over it."
true. Yes. Yeah, now we are, but we weren't before. But thank you for no, I'm just teasing. So, I love giving time to teens because I think, I remember when I was starting practicing and I was, like, trying to figure out, like, what it was gonna be the population that I was gonna spend a lot of time with. And I remember feeling like as a teenage girl that I was like, I really respected and looked up to people as a teen, and I was so highly impactable. And I think I was just like looking for direction or like for somebody to give me good guidance. And
Mhm.
I was like, okay, if that worked for me, then it would probably work for other teens too. And what a cool opportunity. And then other people are like, oh, middle schoolers, yuck. Right. And I'm like, seriously, I love them. Like, I think they're great.
You cannot pay me like, $1,000,000 a year to teach, like, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
Oh, no,
Like,
no. Yes, those teachers are saints. I don't want to be a teacher. Okay.
yeah.
Being a therapist for them,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I love
Oh,
it.
absolutely,
And
yeah.
or being, like a coach or,
Mhm.
some other type of mentor, but teaching, you're right. Those
Yeah.
are very large dollars you would have to give me to be an educator in that setting.
All 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers should just like, their salaries should just be doubled, and there should be, like, an amount, a budget for, like, therapy for them because they
Mhm.
are doing God's work.
Yes, no doubt, no doubt. It is a hard time in life. Okay, so
Mhm.
let's jump into this and talk about like, we ideally our teen is navigating these teen years, which are challenging
Mhm.
and rewarding and amazing and hard all at the same time. But sometimes they're going to come to conflicts or problems or be struggling. What should we be looking out for in terms of mental health to know if our teen is struggling? Because, like, I guess what I'm asking is, how do we know when it's normal, whatever that means? I hate that word, but what is normal? And then also, what is unexpected or something we should pay more attention to?
So I think the always the red flag for as a clinical child psychologist, always the red flag is if it's getting in the way of them living the life that they want to live.
Mhm.
So if it's getting in the way of their academics, like all of a sudden their grades are starting to plummet, and they haven't really mentioned why, or there's not you don't see anything else going on. That's one thing. Their work ethic, so maybe they were able to, work 10 hours a week, but now they're not able to like work any amount, or their hours, the amount that they're able to kind of put in for chores and, holding down a job is significantly reduced.
Mhm.
And then the other one is just like social. So like maybe they used to be a big, like they used to go out and they used to like talk with people and all of those things. And now they're kind of more isolating, which I
Mhm.
think is a little bit more challenging with the teens right now in this Gen Z generation, simply because we're noticing that their overall like social bandwidth is decreasing. So I remember there was one week where I had they're the same age, two different clients. One was male, one was female, and I told them like, "Are you guys 80 years old?" Like in separate sessions. I was like, "I'm pretty sure you're like 80 years old," because they're like, going outside and like talking with people is just so exhausting." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." I'm like, "Are you 80? Like go out, hang out with your friends, like do things."
Mhm.
Um, and so I think those are the things, like, if they're not able to live the life that they want to live,
Mhm.
especially in those 3 areas, academics, work, and social, those would be kind of red flags. I think the other big thing is a significant change in behavior.
Sure.
So if they were doing, one thing and then all of a sudden they have a significant change and maybe you ask them about it, but there's no explanation or they're unwilling to talk about it. And then the other big one is emotional distress. So if they're having big emotions, big reactions to things,
Mhm.
compared to what they used to be, those are all reasons where you're like, okay, this is something is off, something is atypical, something's not normal,
Yeah.
and maybe they could benefit from some additional help.
Yeah. So let's say, I mean, okay, so I had two questions that came to mind. One is, are there orange flags? Are there things that we should be like thoughtful about that maybe don't reach the threshold? Like that, I think as a parent, I'm always like trying to see the barometer, right? Like where are we
Mhm.
at? Like what am I attending to? What am I asking questions about? What am I returning to, right? Collecting more data, maybe talking to friends, parents about. Um, so are there orange flags? But then also my other question is, okay, if we get a red flag, what do we do about it?
Okay, so orange flag. I want to be like, so I wanted, like, my initial thing is like, no, I don't want like parents to pay attention to orange flags, but like there
Mhm.
is like a build up to it. And the reason why like I'm less concerned with the orange flags and I don't want parents to kind of like step in whenever is because I think right now parents are stepping in too quickly and
Yes.
trying to save and become more helicopter parents and
Mhm.
trying to save their child from those uncomfortable feelings. And then I think what's happening is we're starting to normalize, like, we're trying to, it's called, and I hear my brand manager in the back of my head being like, stop using big words, but like we're pathologizing. I think we're in a habit right now of pathologizing behaviors that used to be normal, but now we see them as abnormal.
Mhm.
So like when kids used to be like a loner or they wanted to be have some time alone, like that was okay. Like, oh, that person's just, AKA like a loner. But now it's like, oh, that person has depression. And I was like, well,
Mhm.
no, they don't really have depression. They
Mhm.
just like to be alone. Like my oldest, my girl twin, she's more introvert, like, yeah, she's more introverted, because she's similar to me where she's introverted but she can be extroverted, and she needs energy, like she needs alone time just to like re-energize.
Yeah.
And so I think, or like, autism, right? So it used to be you just were like socially awkward, and now we're like, oh my goodness, our kid can't make eye contact or our child can't interact with other kids, like they have autism. And I'm like, no, no, like let's slow down and stop pathologizing
Mhm.
normal behavior. So I want to be super cautious of like orange flags. Now
Sure.
with the red flags, like what to do with red flags, I would say like, um I think mentoring is, awesome, like finding someone like a trusted adult that your child feels comfortable enough to share with. Now,
Mhm.
parents get super frustrated because like a parent or a mental health professional can literally say the same things to the teen that the parent said, and the teen's like, "Oh my god, yes." And the parent's just like, "I told you that like 4 months ago. Why don't you listen to me?" And it's like, "Well,
Yes.
because you're mom and you're not
Mhm.
cool." Um, and so I think with like those red flags, like trying to see first, like kind of like, okay, let's look at what's the severity of it. Can
Mhm.
we, maybe have them pair up or be mentored by, a trusted adult. And
Mhm.
if that, is not necessarily, not working, or they need a higher level of care, then I would seek out a mental health professional.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I'm thinking like, okay, so if I see my kid kind of not being as social, right?
Hmm.
Maybe they're willing to talk about it, right? Like, hey,
Hmm.
I've noticed this, right? So
Yeah.
I think, like I love what you said about mentoring, but if we came up to our kid and just said, like, hey, Sarah's mom is really interested in talking to you, they'd be like, what is wrong with you? Right? Like, are you
Right.
kidding me?
Hmm.
But I think, starting with just like what you notice, like, hey, I've noticed this,
Hmm.
and not be like, are you depressed? Are you whatever? Are you sad? Are they leaving you out? Or right? Just like, hey, I've noticed this. Like, what's up?
Yeah,
Right?
like what's going on. And I
Yes.
think some
How do you
like
feel
great
about that?
places, so like my practice, when teens tend to get a little bit more what we call resistant, like not willing to
Mhm.
like open up, I give this trick. I do this trick myself, but then I also tell parents about this, like go for a walk,
Yes.
like get them moving, like go for a walk in nature, go wherever. And there's something about like combining movement with not having to like look directly at the person that
Mhm.
kind of like lubricates up their willingness to share.
Mhm.
And I think another reason why teens are a little bit more hesitant to like maybe like confide in their parents is because that I think parents will automatically go into like fix it mode when the child or the teen just wants to like vent and
Yes.
be heard. And so a
Mhm.
lot of the things that I'll tell like parents is like, hey, work on your active listening skills where you're
Mhm.
just like hearing what they're saying, you're asking questions, you're validating their feelings, but
Mhm.
you're not going into like fix it mode,
Yeah.
because that's the first thing that is going to like make your child not want to, or your teen not want to have conversations with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, I mean, in just like thinking about in my relationship with my husband, right? If I tell
Hmm.
him about something that happened at work and he is like, here is how you fix that. And I'm like,
Hmm.
no, heck no. Like, what? No, that's not what I was coming for. Right. So we
Right.
started doing this question where it's like, are you clarifying our role? Right. Are you wanting me
Hmm.
to listen? Are you wanting me to solve? Right. And that
Hmm.
gives me some power to say, like, this is what I'd like your role to be. And I think teens like that too. Right. So being able to say, like, hey, mom, I'm going to tell you something, but I just want you to listen. I mean, that would
Hmm.
be great, right? Like once we practice this skill, they can probably come to you with that. And
Right.
then do listen, guess what? They come back for you to listen again. And I think
Hmm.
that's the thing is like if we are always jumping in to solve it, or we're like, oh, Sarah, like, yeah, she did that terrible thing and I don't want you to be friends with her anymore. Right. Like if we're talking trash on their friends, but now they've healed whatever happened with Sarah, like they're
Hmm.
also not gonna want to talk to us. So I think it's that you can be like, oh yeah, I remember something, a couple months ago happened with Sarah. How are you feeling about that? Right? Like you're
Hmm.
not giving your opinion, which I think is
Right.
so they already know what we think. The truth is, by the time they're getting to like 11 years old, right? Don't you think that our kids
Mhm.
mostly know what we already think about most things?
I would think so, because like we've had conversations. They know what it is. Yeah, they pretty much already know, and they're not necessarily interested in your opinion. They
Yeah.
just want someone to listen.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love. Have you, Bryce? Have you ever seen the? It's like a video on YouTube. It's not about the nail.
No.
So it's like this great like short, I think 3 minute video. I think it's something about title about like it's not about the nail, but it's like a man and a woman, and it like shows like the gender differences of like men wanting to fix the problem all of
Mhm.
the time, and like women wanting to like be heard and like listened to. It's amazing.
Yes. Yes. Okay, I'll look it up. Well, and I
Hmm.
think our teens, even the boys want to be heard, right? And I think
Hmm.
often and when we jump in to solve the problem, I think, we're stealing an opportunity for our kids
Hmm.
for a lot of reasons, right? One is we have to we don't have to. It's advisable that we
Hmm.
teach these humans how to operate without us because here's the truth. We're not going to be here forever, right?
Correct.
So
Hmm.
we need our kids to be able to grow up, to do things for themselves, to problem solve, to have us as a support person. I'm not saying as your third grader, you're going to be like, okay, well, figure this out, right? Like, but I think it's the coaching part of that. Like
Hmm.
you're with them, guiding them, but not always doing it for them. I love this idea of never doing something for your kid that they can do for themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, like, I always in my book, the number two parenting book, I talk about how one of my goals is that if I want them to be independent, so that if heaven forbid, like something were to happen to me tomorrow, yes, my children and my husband would be like emotionally devastated, but they would be able to, pack their own lunches. They would be able to, make their breakfasts. They would be able to get themselves dressed and,
Mhm.
maintain their hygiene and all of those things because my kids are still little. But then as they grow into teenagers, like schedule their own appointments and figure out their own schedule and keep track of their own grades.
Yeah.
Because again, like you said, Bryce, we're not going to be here forever.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's that part of like, teens really want from us probably what we're supposed to be doing, which is listening, right? And being
Hmm.
that guide, right? Like kind of the guardrail. Like we don't want them to go off into the grass and flip their car over. But we also don't have to decide which lane they're in, right? Like
Hmm.
we can let them, there's grace in that, and they are going to mess up, right? And our
Right.
job is to help get them back on track, but like not through doing it for them, right?
Hmm.
We're there to support them and love them and listen and help them figure out what they want to do next. Because if somebody tells me, hey, this is what you're going to do, I am going to be like, if it's what I want to do, I'm going to be like,
Hmm.
yeah. If it's something I don't want to do, I'm going to be like, no. But if it is my idea, right, I'm going to be
Hmm.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
even if it's literally the same thing, right? I think that
Right.
goes back to you saying that sometimes therapists will say something or a teacher will say something and the parent said it 1,000 times. And then all of a sudden when somebody else says it, it's like the best idea ever, right?
Hmm.
So it's like
Right.
they came to the conclusion kind of themselves, right? And
Hmm.
that really is helpful. Okay, so how can we teach kids how to build, or teens especially, build emotional regulation in everyday moments at home? Because I think sometimes our teens feel like they're all over the place, right? Like they're having the best day ever and now they're not, and stuff happens at school or home, or their teacher doesn't grade it how they want, and they kind of can feel like they're just so up and down. How do we help them to kind of find the calm?
So one of the first things that I teach a lot of my clients is the wave of emotion regulation. So I don't think most people realize, like, when you experience so when something happens and then you experience an intense emotion afterwards, what happens is that your emotion will go up, 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 and then eventually, naturally, it will come down and then it will return to that same level it was before that event happened.
Mhm.
And from the start of the rising to the kind of when it returns to baseline, it's usually about 10 to 20 minutes. And so I teach teens that, like, my job is for you not to do stupid shit in that like 10 to 20 minutes, like stuff that you're going to regret.
Yes.
And so I help them realize, okay, what is their emotion escalation? So, like, what do they do when something happens, when they're or angry or sad or anxious or nervous or frustrated, whatever it is? What is it that they're doing? What is their body doing? What is their mind doing that's going to like lead to that escalation? And can we get it so that they're not getting to the peak of it and they're not like volcanoing where they're having like these, things that they're going to regret later on. And that they're able to kind of like ride that emotional wave. And
Mhm.
so that's the first thing that I kind of tell them. So, like, trying to figure out what is their emotion escalation and really help them, like, okay, at what point do you not want to get to? Okay, then we need to kind of pull in some emotion or relaxation skills or emotion regulation skills. So, like, I always talk about 5-2-8 breathing. So, inhaling through your nose for 5 seconds, holding for 2 seconds, and then slowly exhaling through your mouth for 8 seconds, and doing that for like 4 to 8 times. That's about a minute to 2 minutes. And that usually will help out, or distracting yourself. And so I give them a lot of relaxation skills to help them kind of ride out that and then try to like reduce it quicker. And then I also talk with them about, everyone has heard of fight, flight, and freeze. But what most people don't realize is that like our bodies, when we go into fight, flight, or freeze, like when we're going up that emotion regulation, kind of that emotion escalation, our bodies are priming ourselves to either fight, flight, like run away, or to freeze. And so I tell them, like, because your body is doing this automatically and you have absolutely no control over it, one of the things you have to do is you have to figure out and become in tune with what is your body doing. Does it want to fight? Does it want to run away? Or does it want to freeze? And then once you can figure that out, then help your body complete the cycle and do something that's socially appropriate that's going to like meet that need. So
Mhm.
like one of the examples, if you go into fight mode, well, like one thing I'll tell like my teens to do is to do like push-ups, because it mimics kind of the pushing and the fighting movements that your body is already primed for, prepared
Mhm.
for. If you want to run, well, then go and like jog or go for a walk or something like that. Or if you can't like leave the place that you're at, I always tell them like sprint in place. And then the for freeze, it's like if you just kind of are deer in headlights, I encourage them to find like their favorite blanket and like wrap themselves very tightly in that favorite blanket and kind of like lay on the couch or lay in their bed and just kind of like let their mind be still, so that they can complete that cycle.
That's great advice, because I think, yeah, it is impossible for us to keep ourselves from going into fight, flight, freeze. It's a
Hmm.
survival
Right.
response, right? And we need that. We don't want to get rid of that.
Hmm.
However, it can be very counterproductive when it's not about actual survival. And
Hmm.
fortunately, most situations that we find ourselves in, excuse me, are not about life, like they are not survival situations where we would literally need to fight
Hmm.
or run or to freeze to live, right? Like I don't
Hmm.
run into bears very often, thankfully, right? Like
Right.
I'm like, that would be so stressful. Like, is it a brown bear,
Hmm.
a black bear? What am I supposed to do? A grizzly? You're gonna
Am I
die.
supposed to like get big or
Yes,
just like play dead or like what?
am I supposed to be loud or quiet? Yeah, let's just hope that never happens.
Exactly.
But I think remembering that this is a neurobiological response, right? Of
Hmm.
it is our brain's way of keeping us safe. And so your body's functioning exactly the way it's supposed to, just to a situation that is not to the level that we actually need it to. So
Hmm.
to complete the cycle is great advice, because to just stop, I mean, I don't know if you know the Bob Newhart skit where he was telling the woman just like stop it,
Yeah.
right? Like that never works, right? Which is why his sessions only lasted 5 minutes. But I think giving us something that we can do, I think when we have
Hmm.
an action that we can do, it helps us to feel like we have some control too, right? And
Right.
so like by completing that cycle, I love that. So what about like talking, I think for teens sometimes I notice they don't, putting words to the emotions can be really hard. Is that
Hmm.
something that you see teens struggle with too, or do you feel like teens are pretty good at putting words to their feelings?
So it's funny because like so before that session where I talk about like the escalation and the 10 to 20 minutes and the fight, flight, freeze, that I spend previously, like the previous session before that, I spend on showing them what I call like the psychology triangle, that our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotions are all interconnected. And we have no control over our emotions or our feelings, those kind of things, but we can challenge our thoughts and we can change our behaviors, and because of the triangle, that's
Mhm,
going to then change our emotions. And so then after I kind of teach them that, I then say, okay, let's talk about emotions. And I
mhm,
say, okay, list out, and this is it seems it's laughable because I'm like, okay, list out 6 emotions. And some of my teens are like, I have two. And I'm like, okay. The
mhm,
first hint I always give them is like, think of Inside Out, because there's or Inside Out 1 because that's 5. And then I'm like, okay. And then if you've seen Inside Out 2, they give you an additional like 4. And so really helping them, but some of them really do struggle to come up with 6 emotions. And so
mhm,
sometimes that's when we start to talk about like the emotion wheel or the emotions wheel, where it has like all of those emotions listed to it, but it goes down to like the 6 universal emotions. And then it kind of, depending on the intensity, goes, gives you a lot more options. And then I really have them figure out like, okay, so if this person, let's go with anger. Like if someone's feeling angry, how do we know by like looking at them or listening to them or like watching them? How do we know that person's angry? And so they'll sit there and they'll write it out and like, what does it look like when someone's angry? Like, how do they talk? How do they sound? How do they behave? What do they look like? What's their body motion? And so I do that with all of the six emotions. And then whatever emotion like they're really trying to tune into, whether it's anxiety or anger or depression, whatever that is, then I say, okay, choose, your one of your parents, choose one of your siblings, and then choose your best friend. And so then, okay, how do we see this emotion in this person? So like
Mhm.
really kind of like helping them have examples of this emotion in other people. And then once they're able to do that, then I'm like, okay, what does this emotion look like in you? And
Mhm.
then so that they can start to figure out what are those signs that our bodies are giving us to let us know that they are experiencing this emotion that they have deemed like the most problematic or is
Yeah.
getting in the way of their life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be hard because, like, sometimes our kids don't want to talk about these things with us, right? Like,
Hmm.
as the parent, like some of them do and some of them don't. And I think some sneaky ways also to kind of like work it in is like you could ask just like, what do I, like, what do you notice? Like, how can you tell when I'm upset? Like, have your
Hmm.
kid tell you what they notice, right? Like, anger is a good
Hmm.
one because our kids
Right.
definitely feel like, I mean, they notice anger, right?
Hmm.
And
Right.
they might actually misidentify anger at
Hmm.
times. Like I remember my mom sometimes I would be like, "Are you mad at me?" She's like, "No. I'm just like
Hmm.
thinking about whatever, right? Like or I'm doing something else." And I took it personally and really it wasn't about me at all, but I thought she was angry, right? So
Hmm.
have our kids name that or like at the dinner table like picking an emotion and everybody talking about a time that they felt that emotion, right? I think the one thing I noticed in my practice is like parents don't talk about their emotions a lot either,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
So when we don't have adults who are modeling that, then it's really hard to have kids who
Hmm.
are modeling that too, right? That are talking about those emotions because they may not know. And sometimes I think the other thing that we do that I notice is like we're always noticing emotions when they're at like level 10, right? So
Right.
it's like, I know sadness at 10, but like, can I identify sadness at 2? Right? Like I might
Hmm.
actually misidentify that as something else, or I might totally ignore it, right? Which is what
Right.
sometimes I think contributes to these bigger emotional outbursts is that we're not doing anything about, we're not naming it like, oh man, my teacher today like always tells me to stop talking, but like there's a million other people talking and I'm
Hmm.
always the person called on, right? And that might
Right.
be like frustrated level 5, right? Like
Hmm.
and if we can say it, then it kind of loses some of its power, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't build up that part. And so maybe we pour a little bit of that emotion out of our cup by just like naming that. And so I think, allowing our kids to say those things without us trying to fix it and just listening to what they have to say does kind of allow them to pour some of that emotion out so that they are self managing. I'm not saying they can totally self manage. I mean, we're working on it, right? Like to
Right.
25, but that is something that like I think we have to start with baby steps if we want our kids like I think just jumping in to something really big is probably going to be hard. But if you just make it something that the family's doing, or like you're just talking, like you go to the bank and there's a long line and you're like, oh man, lines are frustrating.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just like that is a fact, I feel like in my life. Lines
Yeah.
are
Like
frustrating. Yeah.
Like, when my kids were young, like, I mean, even younger than they are now, and we still do it to this day, but, like, we'll, like, go around and we'll go through all of the emotions, and I'll be like, "Okay, everyone make your angry face," and then sometimes we'll even take pictures of, like, all of us making our angry faces or our sad faces or something like that, and so that they can you can start this as early, as, like, 18 months to 2
Oh,
years where
totally.
you're like, "Okay, make your angry face, do your sad face, do your happy
Mhm.
face, do your surprise face," all those emotions so that kids are starting to like see what do different emotions look on your face
Mhm.
compared to what does it look like on your child's face. Because it
Mhm.
was interesting, Bryce, like when you were talking, I went back to about a few weeks ago. I did a neuropsychological assessment on a 8-year-old, and what one of the things that we were looking at was his ability to read facial cues, because
Mhm.
his mom was like, he's always thinks like I'm angry at him, and like his overall ability to read facial cues is normal within normal boundaries, but his ability to read angry, like he couldn't do it, like he just struggled with it. It's one of his weaknesses. And
Mhm.
his mom was like, oh, so like he can't, like when I have an angry face, she's like, he can't read it. So like
Mhm.
he's just interpreting like me being neutral as angry. And I was
Mhm.
like, yes.
Yeah. I mean, that can be so helpful, right? I think
Hmm.
when we're giving our kids kind of like a manual, there is no manual, right?
Hmm.
Like, but
Right.
but giving them that, we're creating that for them, it can be super helpful. So I love that awareness of like sometimes that we don't recognize what our kids are struggling with. Like maybe we can name it, but we don't know why, like
Right.
what to do about that part, which is why somebody, a therapist, right, can help with that. Like if we meet that level of like we're
Hmm.
stuck and we don't know how to like get past this, it could be a good opportunity for somebody who can see it from the outside or might have additional training that could help with that. So, any other regulation skills you think that are helpful?
I think like if you can help them with those basic ones, I mean, I always talk about like the fundamental, like the five fundamentals of mental health. So like, are they moving on a regular basis? Are they getting teenagers? Are they getting 9 hours of sleep? Because most of them are not.
Yes.
Are they eating protein and eating veggies and fruit? And are they drinking half their amount of like how much half the what they weigh in ounces in water a day? Are they, spending 30 minutes a day doing something that they want to do? And are they like connecting, and do they feel like they belong somewhere? Like usually, like I tell people, like, okay, if you're not feeling like if you're feeling out of sorts, look at those five fundamentals of mental health and see which one maybe you're lacking on, and maybe pour a little bit more or focus a little bit more on that and see if that'll help.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that because sometimes it's something that is easier to correct, right? And that
Hmm.
we can be more resilient. And I think also the piece of resilience, it's not so much on the teens part, but ours of like allowing them to sit in the emotion because
Hmm.
oftentimes we want to save them from it, right? And so like we're also building their resilience because resilience doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. What
Right.
resilience means is that it's how quickly you bounce back from the hard thing or the bad thing that's happened, right? And
Hmm.
so for kids to be able to bounce back, they have to practice that skill, right? And so
Hmm.
hard things are going to happen. Life is going to give that. We are assured that that is going to happen. So then it's like, how do we help them come out of that? And like remembering that, like, that emotional wave, we can kind of cut it at
Hmm.
the knees a little bit and kind of move through it a little faster. But then also, even if it took us 20 minutes to ride the wave, right? That we,
Hmm.
on the other side, that's when we want to be making decisions, right? Like once
Right.
we've gotten through that. And so, like,
Hmm.
teaching them that part of like, most things are not so emergent that you have to respond right now.
Right. Even though like technology makes us think that we have to respond to it right now, like, oh my
Yes,
god, I'm on red, like I have to respond. No, you don't.
yes,
Like take
yes.
take 20 minutes.
Yes,
Go
yeah,
for a walk
especially if you're
and
feeling
then come
fired
back.
up. Yes,
Hmm.
right? Or super sad, like you're gonna say something. Um, you know, pause before you do it, but it is hard. It is so hard. Okay,
Yes.
so speaking of technology and social media, what boundaries do you think need to be in place, or like what can we do to kind of protect our teens' mental health around the social media and technology?
So I when it comes to social media, I kind of go into like the what I call like my bad, better, best framework. So like bad option, like the worst option you can do is just like hand over your child at any age a cell phone, a smartphone especially, and like give them access to like all of the social medias and have like no boundaries in place whatsoever. Like that is going to lead to really bad mental health, and it could possibly also lead to some pretty negative consequences. And like I've heard horror stories upon horror stories that is just going to like alter your child and your teens lives, or can. And then it's also going to cause like a lot of mental health issues. So
Sure.
like that's the bad option, is to like just hand over a smartphone as early whatever age they want and give them all access to social media and have no regulations. I think then let's go up to the best option. The best option is outlined by Dr. Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation. And so he has done research, and he's talking about like no social media until 16 years of age. And parents are like, what? And teenagers are like, no way. But like, that's what research is suggesting, like no social media until 16 years of age. And then the no smartphones until like 14 years of age. So like high school age, you want to like hold off on smartphones. Now
Mhm.
you could always give them like, a dumb phone, like a Gab phone or a Bark phone earlier than that, or like a, just a regular flip phone, something that doesn't have access to phone or the internet. And so like that's kind of like the best option to protect their mental health the most. Now I think the kind of like the middle option is, well, if you're going to give them these things, then you want to teach them how to use them appropriately and
Mhm.
have specific guidelines. Um, so I think you still want to like hold off of those, like those best options. But like, okay, what are your family's values? And okay, let's talk about phones. Okay, well, what's appropriate things, behaviors around a phone, and what are those expectations? And what are those consequences that are going to be implemented if they do not follow through on your expectations?
Mhm.
So is it, is one of your expectations like you don't have your phone in your room at night, like it goes into the kitchen to be charged so that you're not on your phone at all hours of the night? Is your phone expected to be, are you off all electronics like an hour before bedtime so that your brain has time to like decompress and come down so that it's not impairing your sleep quality?
Mhm.
What else is there? There's other ones that people have like recommended is like random phone checks. So
Mhm.
like you're not like checking every single day because that's exhausting as a parent, but you are technically paying for the phone. Therefore, you have possession of it. It's yours, and so that gives you the ability to check your teen's phone randomly whenever you think something might be going on. I'm not so much of a fan of like Life 360 or like those tracking apps that are like tracking your child and your teen like wherever they go, just because I think back and it's like w- trust is so huge in the parent child relationship. And if you're tracking your child all of the time and like when they speed and when they left houses and all of those things and exactly where they're at, like that's just, I think that's too much. And it starts to make the teen not trust you, and you make not to trust your teen, and you're like they feel like you're criticizing them all of the time. So I think that is something that I would encourage parents to be careful of like doing those tracking apps. And then another was social media. It's like, okay, which ones do you want your child to be on? Like, and do you know enough about them to protect your child from safety? Because one of the things that I always talk about is that a lot of parents are worried about child abductions, but then they're not necessarily worried about like online predators. And
Mhm.
like nowadays, like you should be a heck of a lot more concerned about like online predators, especially if you're giving your child access to a phone and social media apps,
Mhm.
because you're just inviting you're not, I mean, it's not like, hey, come this, but you're opening your child up to the possibility if you're not regularly checking your child's like social media and like putting limitations and boundaries on what they're able to do.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I think about with social media, because I got a phone when I was 16 because I drove, right? And it
Hmm.
was not a very smart phone. It barely texted. You had to like do the triple tap, right, to get the letters, right?
Yep.
So it took a lot of effort to send somebody a text message. No, yes was like the extent of what we said, right? Because we were like, I have to write this whole thing out. No, I'm good.
Yeah.
But I think, thinking about the fact that kids go to school and there's potentially some like bullying behavior or just like
Hmm.
difficult peer situations, and then you come home and they don't get that reprieve from that,
Right.
right? And so I think we also have to be thinking about that piece too, like even if your kid, you don't think that's happening, right?
Hmm.
I've had a lot of teens who say to me like, I wish my parents would just take my phone, right? Like they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to tell you that because they like want it, but don't want it. Right.
Right.
But they want you to like assert some type of authority of like, here are the parameters, here are the boundaries, because it is really hard to take a break. And if it's hard for us as parents to take a
Mm-hmm.
break from our phones, right? Put it down, not have somebody like not immediately respond to a text or whatever, right? Then it is going to be even harder for a teenager who doesn't have their brain fully developed and they're very much on the dopamine train, and right, like they want
Mm-hmm.
that good feeling and they want to know who messaged them. I mean, we do too. So like we
Right.
can't expect that they're going to be able to set these boundaries for themselves. Like we have to help them do that, to create these good habits for a lifetime, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're setting the foundation for that, which is so important.
Yeah, because I always tell the story. So I'm a high school football coach, and this started, I mean, I've been doing it for 4 years now, but like 2 years ago, I have like a small group of the football players, like the leaders on the team that I work with, and I was taking them out to breakfast, and it was like a day before they were leaving for like a 3 day football camp. Like then they were going away and they were staying overnight for 2 nights, and they had found out that our head coach was going to take their cell phones. And so they were telling me at breakfast, so they like imagine like high school football players like sitting around like a breakfast table at a restaurant, and they're telling me, they're like, Dr. Mata, they're like, coach is gonna take our cell phones when we go to camp. And I was like, good. And they're like, no, no, but like you need to get our phones back. And I was like, I'm not getting your phones back. Like you guys could live like 3 days without your phones. Like you guys will
Yes.
survive. Come on now. And they're like, but, and I'm like, no buts. Like I'm here for you, but like no, like I'm not. Nope, I'm not intervening on this one. And so they came back after those 3 days, and I checked in with them, and I was like, how did camp go? And they're like telling me all about it, and blah 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 blah. And I was like, well, how was it without your phones? And they're like, we loved it
Mhm.
because they were able just to be teen boys for 3 days, and there was no concerns about someone posting something on social media and it coming back and like biting them in their butts or anything along those. Like they could just connect with their player, like their teammates, and just be. And then
Mhm.
fast forward when the season's over and we're at our banquet, and we have all of our like 21 seniors up there, and we asked them like, what was your favorite part of the season? And like I want to say like 19 of the 21 were like when coach took our phones away at camp. And so they just were able to do boy things. And then like fast forward to like the next year, they again tried. They're like, can you like get our phones back? And I was like, no, you guys loved it last year. Why would I take your phones back? And they're like, but just for like 30 minutes a day, like we need to text our girlfriends. And I was like, no, no, like you guys can be without your phones for 3 days.
Mhm.
And then it was funny because then they decided to pile like 70 players into like one dorm room, and like they were singing and they were joking and they were just having fun. But because there were 70 football players in one room, they set off the fire alarms because it was so hot in there.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. But an experience they totally wouldn't have had if they had their phones.
Correct, because they would have just been each in all of their little dorm rooms 2 on 2, and they would have just been on their phones like da 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 da. But yeah,
Yes,
it was, and so it was funny. I was like, oh my goodness, this is
that's
hilarious.
amazing. Yeah, and I think, that's those moments of getting to live your childhood, right? Like
Hmm.
of doing those things where I think somebody said um something along the lines of like, when I was growing up, I didn't have a phone. I knew time before that. Like the
Hmm.
generations that are growing up now have never known a time before technology.
Right.
And so, that is even harder because they haven't seen it modeled without that.
Hmm.
Right. So
Right.
that also requires parents to kind of step up and model what it's like to get off of our phones. Yeah.
Yeah, because like when we did a Disney cruise back in January of 2024, and I was like, you know what? I'm going completely like off the grid. And so like I didn't have my phone, I didn't have my iPad, like nothing. Like I was reading, books like Percy
Like
Jackson
an
series like
actual book and
crazy.
paper.
Like exactly. I had like carried like 3 or 4 on the cruise with me because we were gone for a week. Um, and yeah, like it was amazing. It was funny because at one point, like we had got to a port, and my best friend had texted my husband and was like, "Is Andrea okay? She's not on social media. She's not posting on LinkedIn. Like, what is going on?" And he's like, "Yeah, she just went off. Like, we're on a cruise and she went off the grid." But I loved being able to model that for my 3 kids because it's like, hey, you don't need to have phones. Like, you don't need these things to, be excited or whatever.
Yes, yes. And I think there's ways that we can actually take pictures without our phones. I mean, sometimes like teens will give me all these excuses like, "Well, I can't because I have to listen to music." I'm like, "There are actually ways to listen to music without your phone."
And they give you a Walkman.
Yes, like let's rewind, right? In history. I mean, but it is so hard. So how as
Mhm.
parents can we model healthy coping skills for our kids when we're stressed? Because I think they're looking to us for guidance. What are your words of wisdom around this one?
So I think one of the things is like you want to pay attention to like how old your kid is. But like if your kid is a teen, then you
Mhm.
can definitely be doing this. Like when you're experiencing big emotions, you can, be willing to like say like, "Oh yeah, like I'm really stressed right now. This is why I'm stressed." And like I think dinner conversations is a great time to talk about these things
Mhm.
because my husband just the other day he was struggling with like his boss or whatever, and he was really frustrated, and so we were talking about it at the dinner table, and our kids kind of like came into the conversation, and they were so cute because I mean 8-year old, and there were two 8-year olds and a 6-year old, and our one of our 8-year old, our boy twin, was like, well, he's not a very good boss. And so he's like giving like, so like inviting them into the conversation, modeling like what does that look like to have conversations
Mhm.
about these coping skills and be getting support from other people that are able to get support. So like they were able to see like me providing support to my husband. And so like having conversations of okay, like this is what we they're like, well, did you do this? And working, my husband's like, no, like I thought about doing this and then I ended up doing this. And so like helping them see like what are the steps to problem solving and to
Yes.
like figuring out what
Mhm.
things are, and like problem solving I think is one of the most underrated life skills.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I teach pretty much all of my clients is like, okay, let's talk about like problem solving, but like actual problem solving where and we have a lot of fun with it where I'm like, okay, let's identify the problem. Okay, now we're gonna list out all of the possible solutions, even
Mhm.
like crazy ones and like illogical ones and super like stupid ones, just because then it opens up your mind to like think outside the box
Mhm.
and think about something that you wouldn't have thought about doing before. So it's always funny because like when we're working through with my teens in my office here, I'll always throw out because I'm an expert in the treatment of antisocial and aggressive behavior. I will always throw out one where it's like, well, you could punch the person in the face. And they're like, no, you can't. And I'm like, you could. And they're like, "But you can't." And I'm like, "But you could." And they're like, "But Doctor," I'm like, "Write it down. I'm not saying we're doing it or like we're
Yes.
advocating it." And then once they like realize, they like start to write like other ones down, and then it leaves brings some levity and it brings like humor. And so then they start to write down and they're like, "Well, I could, put salt in their soup or something like that." And so it's like then it turns
Yeah.
into and then like, okay, now let's evaluate each of these solutions and figure out which one is going to be the best option for us.
Mhm. Yeah. What outcome are you really looking for? And which one
Correct.
helps you to get closest to that? Yeah. Well, and I think it also, I mean, I bet in that, like, once you kind of have the humor or like opening up the mind to the full picture of like what we could do. I mean, there are some
Mhm,
really terrible options we can do and problems. And then there's really great choices we can make, right? But like we may not come
mhm,
up with those great options that is like a perfect middle ground or whatever, right? Like
mhm.
if we
Right.
didn't get out of, well, this is what I normally do, or this is what I can think of now. And so I have these two ideas and that's it. Well,
Mhm.
there's probably thousands upon thousands of ideas, which we probably don't want to spend time doing. But, like to
Right.
come up with 10 ideas of how you could solve a problem is helpful because I think the more we practice that, the quicker we are to being able to solve our own problems. Like
Mhm.
they don't become a quote unquote problem then. We just
Right.
like, we're like, oh, this is the issue. And
Mhm.
here is a really good way to solve this. And some people don't accept our solutions, but we can at least make
Right.
moves towards that part of like, oh, this is an idea that probably would suit both sides or
Mhm.
would make this easier on me or whatever it is. And I love that.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
modeling the problem solving. Do you think parents talking about their emotions just generally is helpful?
I think so. Just yeah, because then like you're able to see like emotions are okay and like everyone has emotions and we're
Mhm.
like normalizing the idea that it's like okay to have emotions and to have big emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think so I grew up with 4 kids in my family, and I also have 4 kids, and I was telling my best friend a couple weeks ago, I was like, "I'm so pissed at my mom because I feel like she made this look so easy." And I am like mad about that because I mean, obviously I know having 4 kids is a gathering, right?
Mhm,
Like we've got some peeps.
mhm,
But I mean, she made it look so easy, and I was like, "Why was it easier?" And so we were talking about this, and my friend had some really good thoughts on it. She was like, well, it was a simpler time, right? Like,
mhm,
obviously, we had problems when we were growing up. This is a different time period, different issues that we were navigating through. But then she said, I think your mom just hit it well. Like, she
mhm,
didn't talk about it. And I was like,
mhm.
oh, I'd never thought, because my mom did a good job talking about emotions, but I think that part of parenting, she had like there's an expectation she needed to be perfect, right?
Right.
And so then to say, "I'm really struggling with this," or like, "You guys are really hard on me," or "I don't know how to do this," or
Right.
whatever. I think, would I think now looking back, I'm sure she felt that way. She just didn't put
Mhm.
words to it. So it's good for our kids to know that, like, just because you're an adult doesn't mean you know all the answers. Just because you become a parent doesn't mean you have all the answers. Just because you get a job doesn't mean you know how to do all the things. Just because you get married doesn't mean you're perfect at relationships, right? Like, we
Mhm.
all have learning and growing to do. And so modeling that imperfection is okay, but like what we
Right.
do to grow is really helpful.
Yeah, and I think going off of that also, I think a lot of parents are hesitant to like share how their child's behavior is impacting them like emotionally. And I think those in done in the appropriate way, I think those that's helpful for the child because then they get to see like their behaviors have consequences on other people.
Yeah.
And so like sometimes like my kids know like just because of like how our schedule is done, like Thursday morning I see clients at 9 a.m. And so they know that like Thursdays have like we need to be, kind of stick to the schedule tighter compared to other days. And if they're like messing around and like goofing around, I'll be like, hey, like it's a Thursday. Remember, I'm going to start to get a little bit more frustrated if you all are not, doing what you're expected to do before you do what you want to do. And
Yeah.
then they start to like once I express that to them, then they'll be like, oh yeah, it's Thursday. Like let's go. Let's and then they're like cheering each other on and be like, okay, let's
Mhm.
get this stuff done so that we're not making mommy angry or something like that. Um, or like doing behaviors that are, making me angry or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, because I think as kids, they're going to test the boundaries, right? And so we
Oh
have
yeah.
to set the limits, right? And to remind them, like, hey, here's where the limit is, right?
Hmm.
Like, we're getting really close to that. And the closer we get to that, the more that things get stressful, and the more that things get stressful, it's harder for me to regulate myself because I have feelings too, right? So
Hmm.
I'm getting frustrated that you're not getting your shoes on. Please
Hmm.
get your shoes on, right? Like, yeah, like,
Right.
let's keep
Hmm.
doing this, right? I think that that's good, and us modeling, yeah, that we can get upset and then come back and repair too, right?
Hmm.
That's something
Yes.
we're gonna mess up. We're just humans, right?
Right. We're gonna yell at our kids sometimes, and
Yes.
that's okay. Like just repair the relationship by apologizing, and not like a fake apology. Like, hey, if you hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. It's like no, like hey, I'm sorry for doing this.
Mhm.
Let's try to figure out how to prevent that from happening in the future.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I get this question a lot where it's teens are resistant to therapy or mental health conversations just in general, right? Like,
Hmm.
so what ideas or suggestions you have for parents who find themselves like, "Hey, I feel like I see some red flags. We really need support. How do we get into that?" Or, "I want to have these conversations with my kid." What advice do you have around that?
So let's go with the first one first. And so how I approach like as a clinical psychologist, how I approach like a resistant teenager is a lot of the time I'll be like, hey, look. Like, and I'll tell them this like the first session at the end of like the first session, like the intake session. I'll be like, hey, look, I know like I'm getting the vibe like you don't want to be here. And so my goal for all of us is for you to fire me eventually, and so mom or dad wants these things to happen. Can we agree that like these are good things that for you to have in your life? Now, can we quickly work towards these things? And then as soon as these things are done, like, you're out of here. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
going to keep you here forever. So that's one kind of spiel that I will give teenagers sometimes. And another spiel is like, hey, let's, can you commit to this for like 1, 2, 3 sessions after this first one? And if you are not feeling it whatsoever, well, then I will completely back you and like say like, hey, this isn't for this person, because therapy is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I will back you. Like you need to like give it your all for the first like session or 2 or
Mhm.
3. And then if it's not working, like we'll just part ways and everything will be, okay. So that's one way that like those are 2 ways that I approach it as a clinical psychologist. I think another way is like, I think we've already mentioned it on here, is the talking, like, active listening, going for walks, opening up dialogue and conversations, and having an open line of communication that your teen can bring you stuff and you're not going to automatically criticize them or give them advice or anything along those lines. I think again, walking, going for a walk or driving, sometimes people do better like if they're, driving and then their teens in the passenger seat, and again, they're not having to have conversations, and it's kind of like they can take some time and they can talk about things in that realm. I think another thing that parents sometimes will do is journaling. So they'll have a journal that they'll pass back and forth
Mhm.
through, from the teen to the parent. And so like the teen will write, stuff in there that they want their parent to know. And it's, they're able, it's multifaceted. Like they're able to like get their feelings and thoughts out on a piece of paper, which is super helpful. And then they're able to like convey that and give that over to their parent, and then they don't have to be in the moment, and their parent, is reading it and processing it, and then can, write questions or can respond back in the journal, and then they pass the journal back and forth.
Love it. Yeah. Well, and I think, it's also if you notice that you've been giving a lot of solving and you haven't been doing active listening, I think you could go to your kid and also say, like, look, I've recognized that I haven't been a very good listener. And
Hmm.
that has probably impacted our relationship, but I want to fix that. And so I'm going to really work at listening to what you have to say. Would you test me? Would you try
Hmm.
me out? Would you give
Hmm.
me an opportunity? Right. And let me
Yeah.
know if I get to that place. Like, hey,
Hmm.
stop listening. Or like, I feel like I'm being interrogated. Or
Hmm.
remember, you're not solving this.
Right.
Right. And so I think there are nice ways that we can do that, or using a code word to say, like, hey, you've gone back into those old things. But I think
Hmm.
apologizing and owning that part of like, I can do better at this really, I mean, teenagers are pretty receptive to that. I mean,
Right.
obviously it depends on where you are in your relationship with your kid, but most of them that I see, if their parents said that to them, they would be like, yeah, I'll give you a shot, right? Because they
Hmm.
want us. I mean,
Right.
they want us, they don't want us. I mean, it's that middle, but they really do want us. And so I think
Hmm.
it's like if we're doing our part, we're owning our piece, then they will generally give us an opportunity to do that. And then it's just that part of, listening to it. I think, the other part, sometimes I think, if you have a teen who is so resistant to therapy, even though you may say, like, hey, let's give this therapist, I always ask for 5 chances. And then I say,
Hmm.
at the end of 5 times, you're going to give me a review. And if you don't like me, I'll help you find somebody who's a better fit for you, or we'll figure
Hmm.
out what is a better fit for you.
Right.
And so, and parents and teens, I mean, almost always, even my super resistant ones who are like, I'm going to wait you out and say nothing to you. Right. Or they generally, I mean, like, most of them
Hmm.
don't fire me. Excuse me. So that's good. But I think, you know, being like this, like getting their investment of like, why could this be helpful too,
Hmm.
right? In that part of like not being like you demand it, but sometimes as parents we need to be the person who's going to therapy, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's our kid, but like sometimes it's us, right? Like we need skills. And so I
Hmm.
sometimes, with some diagnoses, depending on what it is or what the dynamic is, meet with the parents first to start giving them some skills. And sometimes when their kid sees that the parent is doing better or whatever, like they're using skills, then they're kind of intrigued about
Hmm.
that part.
Yeah, there's some diagnoses, like especially like oppositional defiant disorder, which I'm a expert in, is that I won't even see the kid. And the parents are like, "What do you mean you're not going to see the kid?" And I was like, "Because the kid is not like, we need to like give you skills on how to like parent a child who has more of an oppositional, defiant nature. And they're
Mhm.
like, are you sure? And I'm like, just trust me, like give me 6 to 8 sessions. And if we're not seeing any improvement in your child's behavior by
Yeah.
you just meeting with me for 6 to 8 sessions, well then I promise I will pull the child in.
Mhm.
With my more resistant clients, I will do split sessions. So I'll spend like half the time with the teen and then half the time with the parents. And then, maybe 5 minutes or something like with all of us together. And that
Yeah.
seems to help out. Because yeah, sometimes it's not about the kid. It's just the parent doesn't have the parenting skills for that particular child.
Yes.
And so we just need to kind of up their toolbox.
Yeah. And I find that way with OCD a lot too, is like
Hmm.
sometimes we're accommodating so much with what our
Hmm.
kid um we feel like they need that we actually are our own worst enemy in that, and we don't realize it and we don't know how to stop it. So that's another
Hmm.
diagnosis that I work a lot with the parents for.
Yep.
Okay, so what strategies do you feel like we can use to help our teen build a stronger sense of identity or self-worth? I feel like our world is so hard and so fast-paced, and I think confidence and just self-worth and valuing themselves comes into a lot of this mental health conversation. What do you think we can do at home to help support that?
My number one tip for this is exploration. So, teenage years, so that 11 to 25 years of age, the main developmental crisis that they are trying to overcome is figuring out who they are.
Mhm,
And so what's happening is they're putting on all of these different masks, and they'll put it on and they'll try it out for a while. And then if it doesn't fit, they'll take it off and they'll put on a different mask. And so
mhm,
that's why you start to see like, okay, a kid will be like goth for a few weeks and then they're like, okay, I'm not goth anymore. Now I'm preppy. And then they'll start
mhm,
dressing preppy and they're like, oh no, I'm not that either. And now I'm plastics or whatever it is, whatever niche or cliche or clique they want to be a part of. They're going to try on different things.
mhm,
And us as a parent need to give them the time and the space and the place with our hands pulled back and just allow them to explore. You don't need to criticize what their identity is. You don't need to criticize how they're dressing, or as long as it's not violating your values as a family, but give them that opportunity to try on different parts of their identity and not like make them commit immediately. Um, so like allowing them to, we need to allow them to explore all aspects of their identity before they commit to it, because it's the committing to an identity too early on that's going to cause the mental health issues.
mhm,
And so just allowing them like, oh, okay, so you want to play baseball this season. Okay, you're a baseball player, like you want to do everything baseball. Okay, like we're gonna allow you to do that and we're gonna
mhm,
allow you to explore that. I think that in all aspects of their identity. So like political, things that they enjoy, foods that they like, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, all aspects of like who's their favorite sports teams, all of those things, allow them to explore all aspects of their identity and give them that grace
mhm.
before they commit is my by far my biggest advice
I
when it
love
comes
that.
to like identity.
Yeah, I love that. So, do we need to say anything to our kids about that? Like, so if we're like, okay, my kid's going to try out this type of apparel, right?
Mhm.
And so do we say like, yeah, check that out, or do we just not say anything and just let it happen? Like, how do we do that without causing a problem?
I think it's just like, okay, like as long as it's so like the one that's popping in my head, I remember I had a couple a few weeks ago and their parents and their teenager is she really loves wearing midriffs tops. And they're
Mhm,
like, we hate that she wears midriff tops. And I'm like, well then don't buy it for her because that's a value violation.
mhm.
We don't want to like parent our children in ways that doesn't align with our values.
Yeah.
But I think like, okay, like if you're okay with them wearing whatever it is, like, okay, like just if you're okay with it, then and you're going to buy it for them. Well, then you go ahead and be like, okay, like that's what you want to wear. All right, let's try it out, and just kind of like be nonchalant about it, because then you're just giving them that opportunity, the time and the space and the place
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
explore those things.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Then
make it
they
a
don't have
big
to
deal.
commit. Yeah. Then there's not
Right.
like I have to double down on this because I said this is what it is and you made a big deal.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And so I'm gonna like firmly go into this, even if that doesn't really resonate with me in the
Hmm.
end, right? And so I think that creates a potential conflict. I like that part of like you can set limits within like
Hmm.
your financial resources, or like you can say
Hmm.
like, okay, we buy new clothes for the year. This is what you're buying. Are you okay with that being your clothes for this year?
Right. Exactly. And if they want more, well, then are they doing chores to earn more money,
Mhm.
or are they working to earn more money? But they're still buying clothes that fit within your boundaries.
Yes.
Or like sports, right? So like, oh, I remember I had a teen, she wanted to play softball. And her parents were like, oh, we have to buy a bat, and we have to buy spikes, and we have to buy a mitt, and da 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 da. I'm like, only buy like the bare necessities. You only need a mitt, and you need cleats, and like some workout clothes. And then you could always set the expectation, like once you start an extracurricular activity, you have to finish it
Yeah.
throughout the season. Like that's the expectation. Unless there's, abuse or something going on that's horrendous, then absolutely let them out. But we're gonna build some grit in our teens, and we're gonna
Mhm.
expect them to finish those activities. But again, within your financial means. Like I don't want you like breaking the bank to try to allow your child to play hockey, and then
Mhm.
they're into it for half of a season, and then they're like, oh, I don't want to do this, and then it's like, okay, well, crap, now we just spent $1,000 on new hockey gear.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Okay, well, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. And I think so many teen parents will take so many pieces away from this. So I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks again, Dr. Matea. That was all really helpful information. I don't know about you, but I'm leaving with a lot of nuggets of information that I am just so happy to have gleaned. But the things that are really sticking with me from this conversation are the importance of showing up, like literally showing up in our kids' lives, right? Showing up as we are, that is an important part, and allowing them to show up as they are. Being curious in our kids' lives, and that doesn't mean always interrogating them. Often it means not interrogating them, being a really good active listener, and also about creating opportunities to connect with our teens, opportunities for them to hear about our lives, opportunities for us to hear about theirs, and to be there together to support each other through this period of time. With that, I will say thank you so much for your time today. Please like and subscribe to our show. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also keep the emails coming with future topic suggestions for our show to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a fantastic day.
Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.